Hey guys, it's Steph from Render Me This, and welcome to a tutorial. We're going to go over preferences today, and it's not the most exciting thing, but it is going to help optimize your workspace when you're creating your 3D garments. Let's dive into the software. So to start, I have my software open. You do not need to load a file for this activity, as we are just going to go over the preferences and we are not going to be stitching or creating anything. I'm also going to collapse my left-hand side window just so that it gives us more room to be able to see some visuals here. To go to your preferences, if you're on a PC, you're going to do Edit and then Preferences. If you are on a Mac, it will be vStitcher and then Preferences. So when I click on it, I see an expansion box, and I'm going to, again, just drag it over here so that we can see some more visuals on my left-hand side. I'm going to go over the different tabs and talk about the different features that you can choose to use or not use, and most of them will be completely up to you, and I'll have some suggestions throughout the way. The first one's going to be Appearance. Under Appearance, when I select the drop-down, I can choose to be in light mode or dark mode. Currently, my system is in dark mode. Light mode is going to be white in the background and a bit lighter, so that is going to be completely up to you as far as the way you like to visualize things. Next, we have languages. So if I click the drop down, there is a variety of different languages. Note that all of the translations might not be 100% accurate, as we are working in software, so some of the words are quite different, but it does its best. We also have system units. Under this drop-down, I can have centimeters, millimeters, or inches. In all of my tutorials, I work in inches, so if you do like to follow along, I will be in inches. Navigation mode, if I click the drop-down here, I have Browzwear and I have Maya. So Maya is going to be that traditional 3D navigation. If you are a Clo user, Maya may be more comfortable with you. Browzwear's navigation is a little bit different. There is a way to get to more of that Maya navigation by staying in the Browzwear navigation. If you right click on the avatar, you are able to go into this focus view, and the focus view changes that dot to become a pivot point. So I stay in Browzwear navigation throughout mine because I'm able to kind of toggle back and forth between that right click. But if you only want to work in the Maya navigation, definitely change that there. The next is the nudge distance, and the nudge distance is going to be when you're using your arrow keys on your keyboard. So for example, if I were to place an artwork on my garment and I don't want to use my mouse to click and drag, I can select that artwork, and then if I hit my right arrow key, that will be the distance it's moving. So I recommend setting it to either 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 an inch, full inch, just to make sure it is a unit of measurement that you are comfortable using. Intersection tolerance is going to be when the system recognizes two things coming together. So if I have any of my snap to points on, so snap to point, snap to edge, snap to center, that is when I bring two things together and the system is going to recognize and snap those together. Underneath this first section, there is a bunch of check boxes, so you can choose to check these or uncheck these. Reverse mouse wheel is going to change your mouse wheel direction. So if you are a Mac user and you're using one of those glass Apple mice, your mouse wheel might be a little funky. So if you notice things going in reverse, go into your preferences and click that reverse mouse wheel. Otherwise, if you're using just a typical 3-click mouse, your mouse wheel should be okay. But if you are noticing issues, that's where you'd go to fix it. Your gizmo is going to be your scaling device. So that is going to allow you to rotate, shrink, expand, do a bunch of different things that way. Your gizmo being visible by default means when you click on something, it will show up. You do not have to change this tool to be on and off. This is up to you. I like to have mine on so that I'm not constantly having to turn it on when I want things rotated. Alt to pinch, this is a legacy version feature. This is just holding the Alt key when you're navigating in the 3D window to be able to move around. I leave that unchecked. Showing version info in title bar. That one's going to be helpful if you are contacting Browzwear support, as you're then able to show them what version you're in as well as the build. So if there are bugs in the feature or in the software or things like that, they'll know exactly what one you're using. If you're supporting sending in files or just contacting them, you can get them that information. If you do like using Wacom tablets, you can enable gestures on compatible touch devices. So not just Wacom, but other ones as well. Wacoms tend to be popular, so you are able to utilize that with that feature turned on. Moving on to the next column, open folder after print to file. So the print to file feature is going to be under your render section if you are printing out your pattern pieces into PDFs, and that's just opening the folder there. Single stitch by direction is a fun tool. So if you have watched my tutorial on creating a basic garment, we go over our single stitch and a multi-stitch. By turning on this feature, it allows you to see your arrows in single stitch so that you're able to change the direction if your stitch is twisting. That one is definitely up to you on keeping on or off. The next one's enable auto backup, and I recommend and can't recommend enough having that one turned on. The reason you want this one on is because if your software crashes, your system will recover that file for you. So there's nothing auto-saving for us when we're creating a garment. We do have to manually save things, but again, in the case of a crash, it will recover it for you. And then the last one is just consent and automatic submission of all log files to Browzwear. So if things are crashing, it notifies them. Again, your choice on that. Going down the side tabs here, my next one is images and colors. Under the Adobe Tools color profile, this is just your color calibration. So if you are printing things with your printer or showing things on an external monitor or screen, you just want to make sure that your colors are calibrated between the software and what other hardware you are working with. Underneath that, you have your materials. So color blending mode, it's defaulting to overlay, but you can choose to default it to multiply. That's going to be when you're recoloring things. I prefer to keep mine defaulted to overlay. Underneath that, you can add an image editor. So if you are using Photoshop or Illustrator, you can utilize those inside the tool. So if you have an artwork and you want to make an adjustment, you can open up in Photoshop, do save, and then it will automatically replace that image that you've edited in your system. Same with if you want to use AI files. So if you want to use vector files, I would recommend putting Illustrator as your editor so that you can utilize that and recolor each individual vector. We also have clip AI files to artwork, use one master AI file for all colorways, and detect changes to source texture file. Those are all pretty self-explanatory if you are an AI user, so choose which ones you wish to use when working with those files. In the next tab, we have our 2D window, and this is going to be this whole side of your window. So in that side where you see the patterns, you are able to change your background color. You're able to change your guidelines color, your grid color. You can change your grid type from dots or lines. You can also change your spacing. I recommend having your spacing being just a solid number. So I have mine 1 by 1 inch. So if I'm eyeballing things or snapping things to the grid, I know that everything is an inch apart. We also do not use seam allowance when we are creating garments, but if you do have seam allowance and you've removed it, you are still able to see it, and it will show up in whatever color you choose. There's also show textures during animations and double clicking to enable edit points in select tool. So textures and animations, that's up to you if you want to see your different artworks and maps show through. For double click to enable edit points in select tool, that tool is going to be when you are working with your patterns. So if I have a pattern on my 2D side and I double click on it, automatically the edit points will show up, and then I'll see all of those circle curve points. If you have an issue with accidentally editing your pattern and dragging points and things changing, have this unchecked. That means you manually have to turn on the edit points button anytime you want to edit your patterns. The next tab is going to be your resources. So in your resources, you first have your avatar look. So under modesty, if you're working with any of the parametrics, you can have it be no modesty, automatic modesty, or always modest. And that will determine if they have like the bra and underwear on or just the underwear. Automatic will kind of have a mind of its own, whichever one you were last working in. And then Elvenons, if you are working with any Elvenon files, you do need to have a permissioned file. So you have to first buy your permission file to your specific Elvenon avatars or Elva forms, and then load that permission file into your preferences here. We also have simulation. So simulation has auto fast mode, simulation mode, and show textures in prepare mode. I recommend having both of these turned on, as you'll be able to have your system simulate a little bit faster and then also seeing your textures. Under 3D annotations, this is just going to be if you were making any type of 3D comments or fit comments. It's showing you as a user what your name is when you're making those comments. So if I were to make a fit comment and say, this hem is too long, it will show up that me as the user has made that. So if I send the file to someone else, they can see who has made that. Under your tech pack, if you are using a tech pack feature, you are able to change your template, so you can use default, Excel, or large thumbnails. That will just be your export options. You can also choose the path that you are having it go to, and then also choose a custom logo if you want to add that in. Now the rendering tab is super important, especially if you are having issues with some slowness in your software. There is a real-time render or a real-time ray trace option. So if your computer is kind of low spec and there's a lot of crashing going on, I recommend unchecking real-time ray trace. That's going to then allow your computer to speed up a little bit, so it's not trying to do a high quality render or a real-time render in your 3D window. You can also enable the displacement in production render. I have that checked so that I can see my displacement map. And then under your ray trace engine, you can choose from Blender, V-Ray, or Modo. It's going to default to V-Ray. You do have to have the desktop applications of Blender or Modo to be able to render through those, but you can use that as well. Under your render engine, you can also choose if you're doing CPU or GPU rendering. So this is going to be between how your system is using it, whether it's using the graphics card or not using the graphics card to do the rendering. If you have a really high-powered graphics card and there's a system spec page on the Browzwear Help Center, definitely do the GPU rendering. That's going to be a bit faster for you. If you have remote rendering, so any type of cloud rendering service, you can also remote render that way. Under your preferences, you also have open folder after render, and then you have Delta Gen compatible FBX. So opening your folder after that render so that it pops up and you can see exactly where you have had it. And then finally, we have our plugins. If you are using any type of Browzwear partners or have created custom plugins, maybe you have access to the Browzwear API or things like that, you are able to add in your plugins and then utilize those specifically in the software. Now, any of these preferences you have set up, you can export and import. So if you've set up amazing preferences and you want to send it to someone else, you can export them and then they can import those into the software so they don't have to set these up themselves. If you have any questions, just leave a comment below.
Great job today, guys. That was all about setting up our preferences, and stay tuned for another video.